Draymond Green stands alone in the Chase Center gym at 11 o'clock at night, surrounded by a silence that echoes like an empty cathedral. The rhythmic sound of the basketball hitting against the wall reverberates through the dark gymnasium like the beats of a wounded heart that refuses to stop fighting. Each shot carries a frustration that goes far beyond any lost game or technical error. It's the raw pain of a man who feels he's failing at the most important thing in his life. His phone, abandoned on the nearby bench, shows 7 missed calls, all from the same name, Emma. His 14-year-old daughter, whose voice he hasn't heard in 3 weeks, whose hugs have become distant memories, whose love seems to be slipping through his fingers like fine sand. You can perceive that there are moments in life when physical strength is useless against emotional pain, when muscles trained for war bow before the vulnerability of a father's heart that no longer knows how to reach his own daughter. Steph Curry pushes through the gym door and immediately stops upon seeing the scene. In 15 years of friendship and 8 years as teammates, he has never seen Draymond like this, shoulders curved not from physical exhaustion, but from the emotional weight that seems to be crushing his soul. There's something about the tears silently streaming down the face of one of the NBA's toughest players that makes Steph feel a tightness in his chest. "Dre," Steph calls softly, his voice echoing in the empty space like a careful whisper from someone who doesn't want to break something already very fragile. To understand why one of the world's most mentally resilient athletes was alone in an empty gymnasium at 11 at night, crying while hitting balls against the wall as if fighting invisible ghosts, we need to go back 6 months in time when Draymond Green's life began to crumble in ways that no training could have ever prepared him for. It was January when the divorce papers were finalized. Draymond had mentally prepared himself to divide assets for routine changes, for financial adjustments. What he hadn't prepared for was dividing Emma. How do you divide a daughter's love? How do you explain to a teenager that her world is changing without her having any choice in the matter? At first, Emma dealt with her parents' separation with a maturity that impressed everyone. She divided time between houses, kept her grades high at school, still laughed at the terrible jokes that Draymond insisted on telling during the Wednesday dinners that were his. But something began to change when she entered adolescence, and the reality of the broken family began to weigh differently. How is it possible that the same man who can read any opposing player's intentions on a court couldn't decipher the growing silences of his own daughter? Draymond began to notice that Emma responded to his messages with increasingly shorter words, that her smiles during visits seemed, forced, that she preferred staying in her room to watching movies together on the couch. It's impossible not to feel the cruel irony of being capable of motivating an entire team to victory, but not being able to find the right words to reconnect with the person he loves most in the world. Draymond felt each superficial conversation with Emma like small deaths. Each, "Everything's fine, Dad," said, without looking into his eyes, like stabs that cut deeper than any media criticism. The breaking point happened 3 weeks ago, during what should have been a normal weekend visit. Emma arrived on Friday with a backpack that seemed to contain more tension than clothes. She barely spoke during dinner, answered questions with monosyllables, and when Draymond tried to talk about school, friends, anything to break the invisible barrier growing between them, she exploded. "Why don't you understand that I don't want to be here?" Emma screamed, her words echoing through the house like cannon shots. "You and Mom destroyed our family, and now I have to pretend everything's okay, dividing my life like I'm an object." Have you ever felt the exact moment when words pierce through your chest and completely redefine how you see yourself? Draymond experienced this devastation while watching his daughter run upstairs and slammed the door with enough force to make the entire house shake. But it was what she said the next day that really broke something fundamental inside him. When Draymond went to pick up Emma to take her to the mall, a weekend tradition they'd had since she was little, she looked at him with eyes red from crying and said, "I hate you, Dad. I hate what you did to our family." In that moment, something happened that nobody expected. Draymond Green, the man who faced LeBron James in NBA Finals, who never backed down from any physical or mental challenge, felt something break so deeply inside him that he didn't even know it was possible to survive this pain. Emma didn't speak to him for the rest of the weekend, didn't respond to his messages the following week. The 7 missed calls from today are his desperate attempts to at least hear her voice, even if it's just the cold hello she's been using recently. Great things happen when we have the courage to face our deepest pain, Draymond whispers to himself, repeating a phrase his therapist taught him, but which seems empty when his daughter has become a stranger who carries his DNA. Steph observes his friend and teammate hitting the ball with an intensity that borders on desperation, and feels he's about to witness a vulnerability that few humans in the world will ever see. Because, when heroes cry, the entire world stops to understand that some types of pain are too universal to be endured alone. Draymond stops hitting the ball and slowly turns to Steph, his eyes carrying an exhaustion that goes far beyond the physical. For a moment, the two men look at each other through the empty space of the IB gymnasium, and Steph sees something that hits him like a punch to the stomach. His friend, the indestructible warrior who faced the biggest basketball stars in the world without blinking, is completely broken. "Steph, man!" Draymond begins, but his voice disintegrates before forming a complete sentence. He sits heavily on the bench, the ball rolling forgotten across the floor like evidence of a battle that cannot be won with strength or technique. You can perceive that there are moments in life when masks carefully constructed over decades simply dissolve, revealing a vulnerability so raw that it hurts just to witness. Steph approaches and sits next to Draymond, not as a teammate, but as a friend who recognizes universal human pain. "Dre, talk to me. What's happening?" Steph asks with a gentleness that contrasts with all the competitive intensity they demonstrate on the court. The words come out of Draymond like a long-repressed confession. "I'm a failure as a father, Steph. A complete failure." He buries his face in his hands as if he could hide from his own truth. "Emma, my daughter, she hates me. Literally hates me. How is it possible that a man who dedicated his entire life to being strong feels so small in front of a 14-year-old teenager?" Draymond tells Steph about the weeks of silence, about how Emma blames him for the divorce, about how she no longer responds to his messages or answers his calls. She's rebelling at school, Steph. Grades dropping. Problems with teachers. "My ex-wife says it's my fault, that Emma is acting this way because I destroyed the family." Draymond pronounces the words as if each one were a piece of glass cutting his throat. It's impossible not to feel the crushing weight of being held responsible for the pain of the person you love most in the world. Steph listens in silence, knowing that sometimes the greatest help we can offer is simply being present while someone bleeds emotionally. "You know what the worst part is, man," Draymond continues, his voice breaking like a dry branch under pressure. "I grew up without a father. My father left when I was 8 years old, and I swore to myself that I would be different. I swore I would be the father I never had. Have you ever felt the cruel irony of becoming exactly what you most feared, despite all efforts to be different?" Draymond experiences this devastating discovery like an earthquake that shakes the foundations of his identity. I spent years building my career, thinking I was doing it for Emma, to give her everything I never had. But in the process, I lost her, Steph. I lost my own daughter. Tears streamed down Draymond's face without him trying to hide them, as if he finally had permission to be human. Steph feels a lump in his throat, watching his friend fall apart. He has known Draymond for 15 years, seen him face impossible opponents, overcome injuries that would knock down lesser players, but never seen him so vulnerable. "She said she hates me, Steph," Draymond whispers, the words coming out like a confession of a crime he didn't know he had committed. "She looked into my eyes and said, 'I hate you, Dad. I hate what you did to our family.' How do I come back from that? How do I fix something that's so broken?" In that moment, something happened that nobody expected. Draymond Green, the relentless defender who never shows weakness, completely collapses in Steph Curry's arms, crying like he hadn't cried since childhood. "I'm thinking about stopping trying, man," Draymond confesses between sobs. "Maybe it would be better for her if I just disappeared. Maybe she'd be happier without having to deal with me, destroying her life every week." How many times does genuine love disguise itself as self-sacrifice, when in reality, it's just fear of facing the pain of continuing to fight? Steph feels this truth cut through his own soul while embracing his friend who is falling apart. "Dre, listen." Steph begins, but stops when he realizes that Draymond isn't ready for advice yet. He needs to first empty all the pain he has been carrying alone for months. "I look at her and see disappointment in her eyes, Steph. I see that I've become just another adult who promised things he couldn't deliver. She doesn't need a father who is famous or rich. She needs a father who is present, who understands her, who doesn't destroy her family." It's impossible not to notice that Draymond is talking not just about Emma, but about the 8-year-old child who still lives inside him, who is still waiting for a father who never came home. Great things happen when we stop running from our pain and begin to understand that it can be our greatest teacher, Steph whispers, more to himself than to Draymond, feeling that he's about to share something that could change both their lives. Steph looks at his broken friend and knows that the moment has come to share not empty advice, but truths he learned through his own imperfect journey as a father. Because sometimes healing begins when we stop trying to be perfect and start being real. "Dre, I need to tell you some things about being a father that nobody taught me, and that I learned in the most painful way possible." Steph Curry takes a deep breath, feeling the weight of a moment that could change his best friend's life forever. His own eyes fill with tears, not just from Draymond's pain, but from the memories this conversation awakens, memories of his own moments of failure as a father, moments that almost destroyed him in the same way. "Dre, look at me, brother," Steph says with a gentle authority that makes Draymond lift his red, crying eyes. "I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone, not even Isha. You can perceive that there are moments in life when shared vulnerability becomes the most powerful bridge between two souls." Steph positions himself facing Draymond, as if he's about to deliver something sacred. "When Riley was 11 years old, in the middle of the most intense season of my career, she came to me and said, 'Dad, you care more about basketball than about me.' I laughed, Dre. I laughed and said she was being dramatic." Steph stops, the pain of the memory still fresh after a year. How is it possible that a phrase from a child can completely destroy our perception of ourselves as parents? Steph relives this devastation while continuing his confession. That night, I found her crying in her room. She had written a letter to me that she never delivered, saying she felt like I was everyone's father except hers, that I was always available for fans, for media, for training, but never had real time to listen to her. It's impossible not to feel the universal echo of this pain, the devastating realization that, trying to be heroes to the world, we sometimes become strangers to the people we love most. Draymond watches Steph with total attention, seeing his friend strip himself of all defenses and show scars he normally keeps hidden. I spent 2 weeks unable to sleep, Dre. 2 weeks hating myself, thinking I was the worst father in the world. I almost went into depression, man, because she was right. I was giving my best to everyone except her. In that moment, something happened that nobody expected. Steph takes Draymond's hands like an older brother holding a younger brother and looks directly into his eyes with an intensity that burns. But you know what? I learned, brother. What changed everything? Steph pauses, leaving the question suspended in the air like a harbinger of transformative revelation. I learned that our daughter doesn't need a perfect father. She needs a father who recognizes his mistakes and fights for her every day. She needs to see that real love isn't never failing. Real love is not giving up, even when it hurts. The words hit Draymond like ocean waves crashing against rocks, each phrase carrying transformative power that echoes through his wounded soul. Dre, listen to this with your heart, Steph continues, his voice gaining an authority that transcends friendship and touches sacred territory. You can't love Emma completely if you can't forgive yourself for your mistakes. She feels your guilt, brother. She feels that you think you're a failure, and that makes her feel like she's evidence of your failure. How many times do our children absorb our unexpressed guilt and transform it into self-blame? Draymond feels this truth explode in his chest like a cosmic revelation. Emma doesn't need you to be the perfect father that your father never was, Steph declares with a firmness that makes Draymond stop breathing. She needs you to be the present father who fights for her, even when she rejects you, even when it hurts, even when she says she hates you. Have you ever felt the exact moment when a truth completely redefines your understanding of love? Draymond experiences this internal revolution like a spiritual earthquake that shakes all his conceptions about fatherhood. You know what the moment was that changed everything with Riley? Steph asks, tears streaming down his own face. It wasn't when I promised to be better. It was when I apologized for not listening to her pain. When I said, "Daughter, you're right. I failed you, and I'm sorry. But I love you too much to give up on us." It's impossible not to notice that Steph's advice isn't about parenting techniques, but about emotional courage. The courage to be vulnerable with those we love most. Dre, Emma is testing whether you'll give up on her like other adults have given up, Steph continues, each word loaded with wisdom conquered through his own pain. She's pushing you away because she needs to know if your love is conditional or if it's real. Great things happen when we understand that being rejected by those we love is sometimes the last test before healing begins. Draymond feels this truth penetrate his soul like light piercing through darkness. "So what do I do, Steph?" Draymond asks, his voice choked by a mixture of hope and terror. "How do I show her that my love is real?" Steph smiles through his tears, remembering the journey that brought him to this wisdom conquered with emotional blood. "You show up, brother. You don't try to win her back. You don't make grandiose promises. You simply show up, consistently, without expectations. Send messages saying you love her, even if she doesn't respond. Go to her games, even if she pretends you're not there. Because a father's love isn't about being reciprocated, it's about being unshakable. Draymond collapses again, but this time it's not from despair. It's from recognition. Recognition that he was trying to earn Emma's love when he should have been simply offering his, without conditions, without expectations of return. Emma needs to see that you won't leave when she's difficult, Steph concludes, with an authority that comes from scars, transformed into wisdom. Because everyone in her life will leave when she's difficult. Except you. You'll be there. Always. No matter what happens. The words echo in the empty gymnasium like a sacred promise that resonates through the dimensions of the deepest paternal love. Steph's words echo in Draymond's mind during the following days like a melody that refuses to stop playing. For the first time in months, he feels something he had completely forgotten. Hope. Not the naive hope that everything would be resolved quickly, but the mature hope of someone who understood that true love is about persistence, not about perfection. Draymond begins to apply Steph's advice in a way that surprises even himself. Instead of trying to win back Emma with grandiose gestures or empty promises, he simply shows up. He sends a simple message every morning. Good morning, daughter. I love you. He doesn't expect a response. He doesn't demand. He just plants seeds of consistency in the IBA, seemingly sterile soil of a wounded relationship. You can perceive that there is a fundamental difference between loving with expectations and loving with faith. Draymond is learning this difference through each unanswered message, each call that goes to voicemail, each attempt at connection that seems to fall into the void. In the first week, Emma completely ignores all attempts at contact. In the second week, she sends a dry "okay" in response to one of the messages. In the third week, she doesn't respond to anything again. Draymond feels the familiar temptation to give up, to interpret the silence as definitive rejection, but Steph's words sustain him. You show up, brother, without expectations. During this period, Draymond also begins working on himself in ways he had never considered. He seeks therapy, not to fix the relationship with Emma, but to understand the wounds he carries since childhood, and that he unconsciously projected onto his daughter. How is it possible that taking care of our own wounds is the first step to healing the relationships that matter most? Draymond discovers this truth through painful but liberating sessions where he confronts his own pain of paternal abandonment. The first real sign of change happens 6 weeks after the conversation with Steph. Draymond is leaving practice when he receives a message from Emma. Dad, can you come to my volleyball game today? His hands tremble reading the words, not because of the message itself, but because she called him Dad for the first time in months. Draymond arrives at Emma's school gymnasium 15 minutes before the game begins. He sits in the bleachers, not in the most visible spot, but where he can see Emma clearly. During the entire game, she doesn't look in his direction once. But when her team wins the last set, and all the girls hug in celebration, Emma quickly turns her gaze to where he's sitting, and waves. A small wave, almost imperceptible. But to Draymond, it seems like a window opening after years closed. It's impossible not to feel the delicacy of reconnection moments, like flowers sprouting through cracked concrete. Draymond understands that he's witnessing the beginning of something precious and fragile. In that moment, something happened that nobody expected. Emma approaches him after the game, still sweaty and in her team uniform, and simply says, "Thank you for coming, Dad." It's not a hug. It's not a dramatic declaration of reconciliation, but it's real. It's a small brick in the reconstruction of a bridge that seemed to have been destroyed forever. "Always, daughter," Draymond responds, his voice choked by an emotion he doesn't even try to hide. Always. 2 weeks later, Emma accepts dinner with him. Not because she forgave everything, but because she saw that he really wasn't going to give up on her. During dinner, they don't talk about divorce, about hurt feelings, about the past. They talk about school, about her friends, about the new dog she wants to adopt. Have you ever witnessed the moment when two people tacitly decide to start over, without fanfare, without solemn declarations, just with the silent decision to build something new on the rubble of what was destroyed? Draymond and Emma lived this moment during a conversation about mathematics and dogs. The real turning point happens 3 months later. Draymond is in the locker room after a Warriors victory when he receives a message from Emma. "Dad, can I watch the next game? I want to see you play." He reads the message 5 times before believing it's real. In the following game, Draymond plays with an energy his teammates hadn't seen in months. During breaks, he looks for Emma in the stands and waves. She waves back, smiling for the first time in almost a year when she looks at him. After the victory, Draymond is being interviewed on the court when he sees Emma coming down from the stands. She doesn't run to him. They're not at that point yet. But she stands there, waiting, wearing a Warriors jersey that has Green 23 on the back. Great things happen when two wounded hearts decide that love is stronger than pain, that starting over is more powerful than giving up, that family is something we build every day with small acts of presence and faith. In that moment, Draymond completely understands what Steph meant about unshakable love. When the interview ends, Draymond walks to Emma. They look at each other for a moment, two people who went through fire and came out transformed. "Dad," Emma says simply, "you played well today." "Thank you for being here, daughter," he responds, and when she allows him to hug her, Draymond feels that his life finally makes sense again. Steph observes the scene from a distance, remembering the night in the empty gymnasium when his friend was broken and hopeless. He smiles, knowing that sometimes the simplest words carry the power to rebuild entire worlds. Because in the end, the advice that broke hearts was also the advice that healed them. Real love is not giving up, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts.